Hello again. I'm of an age to remember when men were hanged and flogged in this country. The last time a flogging with the cat o' nine tails took place in a British prison was 1962, and hanging wasn't stopped until a couple of years after that. I thought perhaps it would be interesting to think a little about the two things which act to deter crime, as we rather seem to have lost the knack of discouraging criminals these days, and many people feel that they can steal and stab with impunity. One of the things which makes people think twice about committing a crime is how likely they are to be caught for it. These days, of course, the chances of this happening are very slender indeed. The other factor is the severity of the punishment for the crime. In Saudi Arabia, jewelers can go to lunch without bothering to lock up their shops. This is because nobody really wants to go on the rob there and run the risk of losing a hand. I wonder what people think the effect upon the crime rate in this country would be if those convicted of theft faced the amputation of their right hand. Does anybody seriously imagine it would not mean thefts falling to almost zero overnight? However, I'm not advocating such a harsh penalty. I thought I might instead talk about how the Victorians managed to put an end to a wave of violent crime almost overnight by adopting one simple measure. On the night of 24th of July 1852, a series of street robberies took place in the northern city of Leeds. The Times began their coverage of that Saturday night by asserting that garrote robberies are increasing in number, violence, and audacity in Leeds and its immediate vicinity. What had happened was that four young men had attacked two other men on separate occasions during the same night and left them both in a very poor state. There was little doubt that the violence used was quite unnecessary, and in addition to being choked unconscious, their victims had also been beaten around the head and left covered in blood. Those who had carried out these garrote robberies were captured with the proceeds of crime still in their possession. The term garrotters was coined for such robberies because the victim was typically choked until nearly unconscious by one man, while another went through his pockets to see what was worth stealing. It was also, of course, known even in those days as mugging or putting the mug on somebody. For the next 10 years, garrotting became increasingly common, and even sentencing the criminals to 20 years or life imprisonment didn't seem to deter this offence at all. At 1 a.m. on Wednesday, the 16th of July 1862, Hugh Pilkington, the Liberal MP for Blackburn, was walking from a late sitting at the Commons to his home in St James's. His route took him through one of the wealthiest and most respectable parts of the capital, the avenue called Pall Mall, which runs from Trafalgar Square to Buckingham Palace. This was no dingy back street of a provincial city, but the very heart of the British Empire. Mr. Pilkington must have felt utterly safe. As he paused by the Reform Club, considering whether to visit it before going home to bed, two men rushed up and struck Pilkington round the head, knocking him to the ground. While one of the men then gripped him by the throat, the other stole his pocket watch. They ran off before any of those who witnessed the attack had a chance to react. A short time earlier that evening, a very similar robbery had taken place in nearby Piccadilly, when a man was also knocked down, choked, and deprived of his watch. Both attacks were very quick. The muggers evidently wanted to move fast by securing a valuable watch and then making off. They didn't even bother to search the pockets of their victims because that might slow things down and increase the risk of their being caught. The mugging of an MP in the middle of the West End caused huge concern in Parliament. It was one thing for such crimes to take place in Leeds or Hull, quite another to see it happening within sight of Buckingham Palace. The result of one of their own being attacked in this way led to Parliament backing a new and strong deterrent to mugging. The year after the mugging of the member for Blackburn, Parliament voted through a new bill, one designed to put an end to violent street robberies. This was the Security of the Persons of Her Majesty's Subjects from Personal Violence Bill, which when passed became more commonly known as the Security from Violence Act of 1863. Even this was a bit of a mouthful, and most people knew it simply as the Garrotters Act. The existing penalties for theft with violence were already very harsh, but the prospect of lengthy sentences didn't appear to deter certain aggressive young men from trying their luck at street robbery. Until 1863, those arrested for mugging were charged either under Section 21 of the Offences Against the Person Act or Section 43 of the Larceny Act. In both cases, the maximum punishment was a term of imprisonment with hard labour. Under the Garrotters Act, robbery with violence could now be additionally punished with up to 50 strokes of the cat o' nine tails. The cat had been in use in the British Army and Navy for years. It consisted of a wooden handle 19 inches long, to which were attached nine tails of whipcord bound at the ends with silk thread. These tails were 33 inches long. The cat o' nine tails was applied to the bare back of the victim and caused a tremendous amount of pain. Under the provisions of the Garrotters Act, up to 50 strokes could be awarded to be inflicted before the convicted man was sent to prison. The flogging was undertaken by stripping the prisoner to the waist and then strapping him to a wooden frame. The legs were securely fastened and the man's arms stretched above his head. The prison officer, who was paid extra for the job, would then administer the required number of lashes. A doctor was always in attendance and could stop the punishment at any time if he thought the man's life was in danger. Soon after the new law reached the statute book, a youth of 19 was convicted of a particularly brutal robbery in Liverpool and sentenced to 50 strokes of the cat to be followed by 4 years of hard labour. The doctor on duty during the flogging checked the young man's breathing and pulse at intervals, and after 36 strokes ordered the punishment to be ended. He felt there was a genuine risk of permanent injury or even death if the full 50 lashes with the cat were to be inflicted. If the prospect of being sent to prison failed to discourage this awful crime, the threat of flogging certainly did. It only took a few sentences of the cat being inflicted to persuade muggers that the game was simply not worth it anymore, and cases of garrotting soon dwindled to nothing. I wonder what viewers think would happen if the cat were to be the penalty for, say, using a knife on the streets, or indeed for robberies such as the snatching of Rolex watches or mobile telephones. Does anybody think it would have the effect of reducing such crimes? It would be an interesting experiment.